So what is your obligation as a news gatherer? You know, and what do you think about the people coming up in the field today? What would you suggest to them with this onslaught of technology, the constant battering of a 24/7 news cycle? How would you suggest they focus their goals and what they want to do with the news?
Well, there's all kinds of different types of journalism, so it depends on which part you're in. If you're a generalist, which I was, and which you were,
yes,
by and large, my advice is simply read everything you can. Be interested in everything you can. But if you're a business reporter, then, you know, it's much more narrow, and you have to really read within that field. And again, within that field, everything you can find, every opinion you can find, every contrary opinion you can find, just kind of suck up like a sponge all the opinions and facts you can, and you'd be amazed how they fit together rather remarkably and suddenly, to your own surprise, when you're writing a story. It just happens.
And in a completely other direction, but it's very important that we talk about this, I think, because you wrote about it. Your family and how you came into the news. I mean, your decision to go into television news was unexpected. You were to be a mechanical engineer and attend Rensselaer Polytechnic. I'm sorry, electrical engineer and attend Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And your father had a particular feeling about that, but you completely went in another direction and had some resistance. Can you talk about why you decided to include it and more about what happened there?
Well, in growing up, I was told the whole time, you will be an engineer. Actually, initially, my father said, I will only send you to college for one of three things: engineering, medicine, or law. But he later changed that, and it became, you will go and study engineering. And it's kind of funny, he had never heard of RPI, and when I was a senior in high school, he had this good friend of his over to talk me out of this. And I still remember the scene, because the guy was sitting in our living room having a drink with my father, and my father was talking and turned to me as this guy was sipping, and he said, what's the name of that podunk school you want to go to? And I said, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and the guy went, Jim, I can't even hire people who flunk out of there. Are you kidding me? My father was a graduate of Ohio State and had never heard of RPI. So then he became somewhat enthused about RPI. And when I got there and realized I had never really thought about what I wanted to do, and I hadn't, and I sort of knew that as a senior in high school. I really was wary of that. I knew I had not investigated enough colleges. I had not investigated what I really wanted to do. He became angrier and angrier as I became more and more certain I didn't want engineering, until finally, when I told him, I will finish this, but I won't work in it. I think I want to work in broadcasting. He terminated tuition. I will no longer pay for your education, so I didn't finish. I had one term left. Then I left and went to work in radio, because RPI had allowed me to get the FCC license to run transmitters. After junior year at RPI, it was a pretty easy test. So radio stations were interested in hiring people who also had the license, because you could do two jobs, not one. And that's how I got into radio.
But doing two jobs was something you've done for most of your career, because you talk about in the book how you were producing the news and then you were the anchor.
Yeah.
How does one handle that?
Oh, that was that was about 3 years, maybe a little more. It was exciting. It really was fascinating to do every night. And in one sense, I loved it. And in the other, it was just too much work. It just became an impossible load. I don't know. When I first went, you know, I have the face for radio. So I went to WGY, and I was there less than a year, actually, working next to the television assignment editor, 6 o'clock producer. I was working radio, and the two desks used to be side by side. Well, the TV assignment editor had a falling out with the news director, who one day said, you're now the 6 o'clock producer editor. And I had never done television. I really had never written for a living. I don't know how I did it. I took rundowns and saw what they were, and for the first couple of months was probably inept. I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of idea of what I was doing, but after a while, like everything else, it became much easier to do. I could kind of do it in my sleep. It was still pressure-packed, but it was more interesting than just anchoring. Anchoring can be just reading what someone else has written, which is challenging, but isn't sufficiently interesting. I always like to write, and even all the time at 13, it was terrific. As the technology changed, I could sit in my office, call up the 6 o'clock script, amend anything I wanted, just file it, and away it would go. That technology allowed me to not write everything I was going to read on air, but at least amend it, edit it, be familiar with it, and go with it. So technology was a great help. I was back with the typewriter when we started, and carbon sets.
There were typewriters in the Times-Union when I got there, and at the Troy Records.
You know, we had a sports guy, Bob McNamara, who would not use electric typewriters. He had an old Underwood. He pounded on the keys, and we all wondered what happens when computers come in. Mac adjusted instantly to computers and turned to me 6 months later on set and said, "Ed, I would never again work without him." And I was amazed. Here was a guy who couldn't adapt to electric typewriters, but loved computers. They made such a difference.
Yeah, the technology has really, it has accentuated the news, I think. I feel like things have improved as a result, even though there are drawbacks from the internet. You know, if people are doing their jobs, it seems to facilitate the enterprise.
It made television, and I take credit, and it was really me and Steve Bobolis for Live Local Late Breaking. But frankly, Live Local Late Breaking really summed up what I thought television should and could do best. And that instantaneousness of television became more and more available and really allowed us to blossom as a news medium.